Hello, my fellow fallible humans. Welcome to the Red Roof Recovery Show. This is a program to soften the path of recovery from substance and behavioral addictions. And in my experience, it's not just for addictions, it's for life. I'm honored to have my partner, my husband, my best friend. He's joining me to bring a family perspective to the addiction recovery horizon, because he's lived with me in marriage for over 31 years now. And I am so grateful that he has persevered through my addictions to drugs and alcohol. So I like to call him Sir Lancelot. Thank you for being here, sweetheart. As always, I'm eternally grateful.
You're welcome, my love.
So we're going to talk about acceptance. It seems to be a common theme in recovery circles because it took me a very long time to reach a place of unconditional acceptance. So my recovery journey started when we were living in Spain. My addictions to drugs and alcohol took a very fast spiral downward when I got to a place where my two favorite things, brandy and wine, were cheaper than water in Spain. So what that did is it actually helped me spiral very quickly downward and pushed me into seeking recovery sooner than later. But of course, you, my darling, were watching my addictions progress over the years. And you have shared with our listeners and viewers over the years what that was like for you. And how did the whole concept of acceptance come into your life when you were dealing with me and watching me slowly kill myself every day?
Well, I think the main thing is prior to moving to Spain, you would try to manage your addictions. So you would have periods of using a little bit less, measuring out, and you were still drinking, and I presume you were drinking a little bit more than I knew, but you seem to be trying to manage, shall we say. However, when we got to Spain, and as you said, we were embroiled in bureaucracy and living with a whole bunch of expats who had retired, and their day started off with coffee with a couple of shots in it. And this was the company you were keeping. As you always say, we can be the company that we keep. The downward spiral was quick. And what I realized quite soon after we got there is that I used to be able to say to you, I think you might want to throttle back a little bit on the drinking. It seems to be getting out of hand a bit. And you would say, yeah, I think you're right, and start to try and moderate somewhat. Whereas when we're in Spain and you were in that, basically I call it a free fall, you just chewed me out. You just went, mind your own business. I'm dealing with this. It's not anything to do with you. And I didn't realize it was nothing to do with me. I couldn't help you. I wasn't the one drinking. I wasn't the one spiraling out of control. And it didn't matter what I said or did. It just didn't matter. So I had to accept that the one I loved was going to do what she was going to do. And I had to do what I was going to do. Was that stand by you and try and see you through it, or was that leave? And at that time, it hadn't got to the point where the cost benefit analysis was getting closer to leaving than it was to staying. But the acceptance of realization that you cannot change what someone else is doing was a big one.
And I think timing for you, of course, as well, because you were taking on a new position as a project manager. So you were kind of becoming a workaholic as well. And I think you were perhaps distracting yourself with what was going on with me at home with work. You just spent more time at work.
Well, the funny thing is that we went to stop me working as much. And if you remember, for the first 9 months or so after you got there, maybe 6 months or so, I did work less. But then the crash of 2008 hit and everything went sideways. So just trying to keep the business afloat, trying to get orders, trying to ship orders just became more magnified, and the longer it dragged on, the more embroiled I got in it. And so, yeah, I was distracted as well.
So here we are, that was the crash of 2008, and now we're embroiled in yet another crash of the COVID-19 pandemic. We're recording this in the year of 2022, where we are now over 2 years in the COVID-19 pandemic, where we're seeing absolutely, I think, in many ways, this is our World War III. Small business has been decimated, and addiction and suicide rates have tripled. So the world is seeing a different kind of crisis on a whole other level of magnitude, I think. Certainly in our line of work, we're introduced to the tragedy of this pandemic every day.
Yeah, people's coping mechanisms are being stretched. You know, it's okay dealing with addiction when that is the fundamental thing you're trying to cope with, to either manage your addiction or just get through the day. But then when you've got the added stresses of isolation, I know with addictions you tend to isolate to somewhat, but there's a congregation of like-minded people as well. Add to that the inflationary type thing, so money is even scarcer than it used to be. When you add all these factors in, then coping mechanisms tend to stretch and regretfully sometimes snap.
Yeah, and I think for me, the more I learn about addiction, because addiction is not a character defect. It's not a moral failing, as was the indoctrination I received when my recovery journey started in 2009. The only model of recovery was the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm certainly not bashing 12-step programs. AA saved my life without question. And something called SMART, self-management and recovery training, gave me my life back, because it deals with cognitive therapies, thinking therapies, and that made more sense to me. It's evidence-based, science-based. It evolves with science because science is always changing. And what I'm learning is that even though addiction is still the most stigmatized condition on the planet, it's a biological vulnerability, and it's a chronic illness. It's a disorder of the ability to regulate dopamine. I believe that. That's still a theory. Like I said, there's still so little known about addiction, and addiction has been an epidemic for as long as I've been on the planet, for 6 decades. So it's just puzzling to me why we have these models of recovery that are simply not working for the majority of people. But our governments continue to throw millions and sometimes billions of dollars toward these models of recovery that are just not working. I kind of use the comparison of my nicotine addiction. I was addicted to a pack and a half cigarette habit for most of my adult life. It was a very difficult addiction for me to overcome. I used a lot of different approaches with prescriptions and the nicotine patch, and trying to moderate it, and you name it, I tried it. I spent a lot of money trying to overcome my nicotine addiction. And I thought, well, they give you a nicotine patch, that regulates nicotine throughout the day. So you're absorbing these hits of nicotine to help you withdraw from the addiction. And I'm thinking, I wonder why they haven't come up with a dopamine patch. Because the more I learn about addiction, the more I believe that it is directly related to a deficiency of the ability to maintain healthy dopamine levels. And I'm convinced that that could be the key to helping people recover and to get out of that mode of thinking that, we're a moral failure, we're defective in character, and there's something wrong with us, because it's a biological vulnerability, which is what motivated me to start speaking publicly about my addictions and subsequent recovery, because there is still such a stigma around it that is just keeping people frozen in not asking for help, not reaching out for help.
Well, I think that also there's a bigger problem that one of the things that the government does, it has to do something. When you say the modes of recovery do not work. So if they went, well, we don't know what to do, so we're not going to do anything, then there would be a public outcry. Mm. So certain bodies say, we have an answer. It's not particularly successful, but we're doing something, and the government will go along with that because they're being seen to do something. When it comes to the stigma, I find it quite strange, because what it showed at the beginning of the pandemic was that we were told that all non-essential businesses would be closing down. However, your liquor store and your beer store are going to stay open. And the rationale was that if we close that the ERs will be inundated with people, which tells you the government knows that the addiction problem is far larger than what the public think it is. And there's a heck of a lot of people out there that either don't think they have a problem, don't want to realize they've got a problem, and they do have a problem. Now, I don't know whether you think there is, you've always said that addiction is a progressive thing.
For me, it was.
But is there degrees of addiction? As in, can someone have to have a drink, 2 or 3 drinks, 4 or 5 drinks every day, which is an addiction, but will not go right away down the rabbit hole, as in to getting to drink a bottle a day?
Well, I think that certainly that's how it started for me. I was having an average of 3 to 5 drinks a day. And when I saw my doctor, I was prescribed an antibiotic for something. And, you get those little inserts in the bag with your prescription. And when I read it, it said, if you have 3 or more drinks a day, do not take this medication. And when I went back to the doctor and said, you'll have to prescribe something else, I can't take this. Why can't you take this? She said. I said, because I have, between 3 and 5 drinks a day. And she said, so you're an alcoholic? And it was like getting slapped in the face. It was like, no, I'm not an alcoholic, because of course I was with company who were also drinking 3 to 5 drinks a day. That was normal. That was average. So I certainly didn't define myself as having a substance use disorder or an alcohol use disorder, because all my friends were consuming the same amount. And I was also maintaining a successful career. We had a house, we were keeping up our mortgage payments, we each had a car, we were keeping up our car payments. We were also holding more debt than savings, which most Canadians and North Americans are, unfortunately. But that was normal. That's considered a normal state of being. So I felt that there was nothing abnormal about my drinking and drugging. I didn't mention the drugging part to my doctor, but so that was a slap in the face. And, so then, in recovery circles, we say, denial is more than a big river in Egypt. So what did I do? I walked out of her office and I found another doctor, because I wasn't ready to face the fact that my addictions were progressing. They were becoming unmanageable, but I was staying in the company of people who were reinforcing my belief that this was normal.
So here we are sitting here in North America, talking about your doctor and the inserts, saying that 3 or more drinks a day
Constitutes alcoholism. Yep.
So let's take ourselves back to when we lived in Spain. Almost everyone in Spain has more than 3 drinks a day.
Correct.
They have their menu del dia, where there's a bottle of wine on the table. Okay, it's between 4 people. They go home, there's wine with dinner and thing. Then they go for a walk with the family. They sit at a bar, they have a couple of drinks and have a chat, and they go home and go to bed. They have more than 4 or 5 drinks a day, every day. But in Europe, they're not classed as alcoholics. That's just normal life.
Mm-hmm.
So is all of Europe, are they all alcoholics, or is a different measurement wherever we live?
Well, the definition of an addiction is when we continue to do something in spite of the negative consequences. So if there aren't enough negative consequences to, give you that alert that there's something wrong and that these behaviors are becoming unmanageable and you need to seek help to, get things back under control, because, a lot of people that I see in recovery are still wanting to moderate because we live in a society that normalizes the consumption of alcohol and now drugs. We've got marijuana stores on every corner of towns and cities because, our government has figured out a way to legalize it and tax it. So it's now legal. So I think we're only scratching the surface of the addiction rates that have already tripled. I think it's just beginning.
Well, also, I always remember back in when I first got here, a few years into, the government wanted to put up the price of a case of beer by $2 and add some tax. And gas prices have been going up and this has been going up. But there was almost a revolt when people said, you can't do that to our beer. Now, is it that, European and North American, European-based, most of the world have had an alcohol culture, shall we say. Things have been fermented for pretty well as long as human beings have been on, growing stuff. We've been fermenting stuff from horse's milk to barley and what have you. But I think it's a way of placating the masses as well, keeping them under control. I read something once. There was in Morocco there was a sultan called Moulay Ismail, and what a lot of people didn't realize that there were a heck of a lot of European slaves in North America. They used to come and take whole villages from up in Scandinavia, the UK, France, and all the way around the Mediterranean basin. And for the longest while, all these European slaves would be unruly, shall we say. And one of Moulay Ismail's advisors said, after a day's work, give them a measure of wine. And he said, but this is a Muslim state. We don't drink. He said, but they're not Muslim. And give them a measure of wine. And it placated the masses.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the government has part of that as well.
Mm-hmm.
We know that alcohol doesn't do you any good. It's literally a poison. Do you drink it, nobody?
Same with cigarettes. We know that cigarettes, ask any doctor, and they say, the combined effects of alcohol and tobacco consumption over time has far more harm on people than all chronic illnesses. So, we've got 2 of the most harmful substances that are highly taxed and readily available. And we have to ask, why is that? Because, we're also dealing with societal constructs around educational systems that are training us as children to be obedient, complacent taxpayers who are told what to think, not how to think. So I think parents are waking up to those realities. I think if anything, this pandemic has brought everything to a very clear vision for people of what's important. It certainly helped you reach a place where you wanted to retire sooner than later, because time is not a renewable resource.
Yes, but you know, there are a lot of people out there, friends of mine that I've worked with, and that didn't have that luxury. I mean, if I was 40 years old and we still had the big mortgage, and you know, especially if we had a couple of kids putting them through university, which we do not, but if we did, then there's no way I could have, you know, given up unless we changed our life totally. Sold the house, sold the cars, took the kids out of university. So, you know, I feel very fortunate that I was at a point in life where I could just say, you know what, it's time. There's a lot of people that don't have that. And, you know, that adds to their everyday stress, which when people get stressed out, how many times do we hear, like, you know, especially on a Friday evening, thank God it's Friday, I can pour myself a drink and relax.
Yeah,
because we tend to associate alcohol and cigarettes and marijuana and that with relaxation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Which I'm not sure about marijuana because I'm not that up with that, but cigarettes and alcohol are actually a stimulant. So you're not relaxing, you're actually increasing your heart rate. And then after the alcohol stimulates you, it sends you into a depression. So, yeah.
A double-edged sword there, yes.
Double-edged sword. So on a Friday, everyone's saying that they're relaxing, but actually they're not. But we've been taught this.
Yes. So to the acceptance piece, the unconditional acceptance, we're down another rabbit hole for sure, as we so often do. But on the acceptance pieces, so for me, acceptance took me years and many, many relapses. So I spent 8 years in 12-step programs of AA and NA, and I was relapsing every year or two. And what I was observing in those meetings as well, I love the peer support of 12-step programs. I still go to 12-step meetings. I think it's the best personal development program on the planet. But I was going to a lot of funerals, and I thought it's just going to be a matter of time before I don't come back from one of my relapses. And that's what motivated me to look for an alternative, something I could bring to my community that might help people resonate more with the journey of recovery, because it's a journey. And more often than not, it's not a linear journey. It hasn't been for me. But I am happy to say I just celebrated 4 years of continued abstinence from drug and alcohol addictions. And that is when I found SMART, self-management and recovery training. It's growing exponentially now. I'm happy to say it's international. Actually, I wanted to have a quick look at the UK SMART recovery, because there's a gentleman there who does a very good rendition of something we call the hula hoop tool. So let's watch this together. It's only 4 minutes, and then we're going to sign off. So let's watch this now.
Okay.
Hello. Today I wanted to have a look at the hula hoop tool, which is a great tool for helping us when we think things are getting on top of us, other people, other events are affecting us and getting on top of us. So it starts with the idea that as a person, here I am, I have, the same as all human beings, I have thoughts, I have feelings, and I have behaviours. I have things that I believe and think, things that I feel, emotions, and things that I do. And you can imagine that those thoughts, feelings, and emotions are in a hula hoop. Like you're wearing one of those old big loop things that you swing around. a hula hoop. And my thoughts, feelings, emotions are inside that hula hoop. And that means they're my responsibility. I'm responsible for everything that happens inside my hula hoop. Everything outside my hula hoop, that isn't my responsibility. The only thing I'm responsible for are the things inside my hula hoop. Now, what that means is that someone else, maybe Fred here, Fred, he's also got thoughts, feelings, and behaviours. And they're his responsibility. Now, what I want to try and do is not let Fred's thoughts, feelings, and behaviours affect mine. An example might be that, say, maybe Fred loves Wraith Rovers. He thinks Wraith Rovers are the best football team that's ever existed. Nothing could be better. And he knows that I like Brighton and Hove Albion. I support Brighton and Hove, and I think they're amazing. And Fred might say to me, well, Brighton are rubbish. Look at them, they're useless. They can't play football for toffee. And so that's Fred's thoughts coming over towards me. Now, I could get really upset about that. And it could really annoy me. And if I get really upset and really annoyed by it, I might go and use my substance to try and stop myself feeling so upset or annoyed. But what I can do is I can use my hula hoop as a barrier. So I'm not going to let Fred's thoughts and feelings affect my thoughts, feelings and behaviours. Fred's quite entitled. He's quite allowed to think that Brighton and Hove are rubbish. He's quite allowed to say that. That's his responsibility. Off you go, Fred. Knock yourself out. Say what you like. But I'm not going to let your thoughts affect my feelings. Fred might even go and write online and write about how rubbish Brighton and Hove are. And he's allowed to do that. He's allowed his opinion, and he can go and do that. And I might see it and read it on Facebook or social media, and I could get really angry with it. So I could get really angry. His behaviour could make me really angry. But if I allowed that to happen, I might go and do something, might go and use my substance to make myself feel better. So again, I'm going to use my hula hoop and imagine it as a barrier. This is my safety barrier. Everything inside here it belongs to me and is my safety barrier. I'm not going to let Fred here upset me. Fred's allowed his opinions, he's allowed his thoughts, his own feelings, his own behaviours, and he can say those things. But I'm not going to let Fred's feelings come in and affect my feelings. And by doing this, imagining this hula hoop around us is like a barrier with all our thoughts, feelings and behaviours inside. What I can do is I can protect myself. I can protect myself from feeling bad. And if I can feel less bad, there's less chance of me going out and using my substance.
So yeah, there you have it. I love that concept of the hula hoop. What is within our control? There is great power in knowing that the only thing we can control in life is ourselves. Thank you so much, my darling. I always love your perspective. Thank you for being here. And thank you for hanging out with us for an hour of your time. You're an integral part of my recovery journey. But let's talk to ourselves like we talk to our best friends. We talk to ourselves in our heads more than we talk to anyone. So let's make the effort to make it a nice place to be. May the force be with you. And remember, you are the force.